Aloha, and I am Geralyn St Joseph, and we are here today to talk about peace, and that peace is possible. We talk about this in a wide variety of ways. Today we're discussing peace after a difficult or abusive relationship. The reason why I use difficult or abusive is because many of us who have gone through very difficult relationships are a little reticent to call it abusive. We feel that abusive is much bigger than what we went through, when that's not necessarily the case. But we'll just encapsulate everyone to make it more digestible. So basically, when I talk about a difficult or an abusive relationship, this incorporates all different types of relationships, whether familial, it could be parent-child, it could be sibling. Most people think of abusive relationships as romantic relationships, but this can also occur in friendships, and often does. An abusive relationship can occur anytime there is an imbalance in the power between individuals. This is a natural occurrence when you talk about children and parents, or someone who's working supporting someone who's not working, things like that. Although an imbalance of power does not create an abusive relationship, it allows for it to happen. Sometimes the imbalance in power is not real. It's what we think it is. It's what we've convinced ourselves it is. It's that we give up part of ourselves to the other person and we allow them to treat us poorly. True abuse happens oftentimes very, very subtly at first, and sometimes it's subtle throughout, while gently chipping away at our sense of self and breaking apart our self-esteem, lowering who we are as a person, questioning our integrity, having us do things that go against our integrity, where you get a bad feeling in the pit of your stomach, or you're feeling that things are not quite right, or this isn't exactly what you meant, or this isn't exactly the way you would do things. Oftentimes that's part of it. That's also part of gaslighting, which is a very specific type of abuse. And gaslighting is potentially very, very dangerous and can lead to deep depression and even suicide in some cases if it's not recognized and if you don't get help. Our relationships, our interpersonal relationships, whether they be with strangers or people that we know, relationships have a function in our lives. Part of that function is to help us to grow. That's not always the great feels. Sometimes in order to grow, we feel sad, or we get angry, or we feel other emotions that may be perceived as negative. Just because we perceive an emotion as negative, it does not necessarily make it so. It may be there to help push us through something or to make us acknowledge something. Maybe we're not paying attention or listening enough to our inner senses, or really acknowledging what's going on around us. And so our bodies and our emotions start letting us know that things are not right. So some of the things that will create a fertile ground for an abusive relationship is the need to be liked or accepted. Most people have this need, but there's a difference between a healthy need to be liked and accepted and an unhealthy need. So a healthy need to be liked and accepted is someone who tries to figure out what the social norms are, is very considerate, tries to figure out what the culture is like and what is expected of them in the culture. Social norms and things of that nature should not go against your deepest integrity or your sense of self. By that I mean, if it's a social norm that people lie, that's not necessarily something you want to do, because that will make you feel unstable. It just because everyone else is doing it does not make it right. So there's a fine line there. But even if you try to maintain the social norms and you try to, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, it still can be a very healthy sense of self. Now, on the other hand, other side, which is unhealthy, the need to be accepted and liked becomes almost neurotic, where it will have a stranglehold on you, and you get so anxious, constantly trying to figure out what everybody else is thinking, and does this one like it, does that one like it, and analyzing and trying to perceive every little bit of information coming from people, whether it's innocuous or not, and taking everything in as a pro or a con, and judgment. That in and of itself, even if you're in a healthy relationship, can really beat up your self-esteem and your sense of self, and it needs to be dealt with. There's a lot of different ways to deal with that. We're not going to talk about that today, but I'm just giving a general idea of what creates a fertile ground for an abusive relationship. So a desperate need to be liked and accepted, an unhealthy need to be liked and accepted, where that is paramount to everything else, and you are willing to forego your own integrity and your own virtue in order to be liked and accepted. You're willing to do anything. So you need to be careful of that. The second thing is when someone is either newly entering into a spiritual practice, or they get into a spiritual practice where it is all encompassing and it's a black and white thinking type of spiritual practice, where if you're not doing as I do, then you're wrong. Everything else is wrong. Everybody else is wrong. Only I am right. And there is a guru and a cult leader or a leader who, whatever they say is right, whether it feels right to you or not, you have to listen to them, and they are the leader. That you are not given a sense of self, and you're not given a sense of self-empowerment. Someone with an obsessive need for harmony, that they can't stand conflict on any level, where they need people to be happy all the time, and you strive for that. That goes along with a sense of being liked and accepted, but even more than that. So what that means is that then you will interfere in other people's relationships to try and smooth everything out, that there can be no arguments. Don't ask me any questions. Don't ask me why. Don't question anything. They take that as an affront and as something that is attacking their harmony, as opposed to something that can build trust and can help educate themselves as well as other people. So a need for harmony, we all want harmony. There is a want and a desire to live in a harmonious atmosphere where people are happy with one another. There's a sense of joy and peacefulness and happiness. However, that does not discount, discredit, or disclude discussion. And discussion does not necessarily mean argument, but discussion also does not mean that everybody agrees with everybody all the time. That is incredibly boring and does not help anyone to grow. So when you have a neurotic need for harmony, and everybody's got to agree with one another and everything's got to flow and there can't be any questioning, that will lead you to a place where it's very easy to be in an abusive relationship, or you could even be the abuser, because if you demand harmony in all things, that is very unrealistic, and it's not allowing for an exchange of ideas or an exchange of thoughts. It's very limiting, and it's not helpful. So again, there's a healthy and then an unhealthy, and there is a whole dynamic that goes in between. And there can be moments when you're unhealthy and moments when you're healthy, but you have to see where things fall more often than not. And again, the key is that when you feel yourself or see yourself going against your own integrity, that's when you're in a place where abuse is possible. You're laying a very fertile ground for that, and it may be occurring to you. We need to take responsibility for what we're doing, how we're participating. Like if we have this need for harmony so that we do not speak up for ourselves and we cannot tell someone else no, or tell someone else that we don't agree with them and we just go along with everything, that's our responsibility. It's our responsibility to build up our self-esteem, to come into our own self-empowerment and self-awareness, to know where our integrity lies and to follow that. And it's our responsibility to build that up. Now, sometimes we'll have very good friends who help us with that, but ultimately it is up to us to do that, to maintain that. If you remain isolated, so if you get into a relationship with someone and they are your entire world and there is no one else but them, you might create that and they might create that. Either way, when there's isolation involved, you have a fertile ground for abuse. So if you are a fairly social person and then suddenly you have a friend and they demand that they are your number one friend and your best friend and you have to invite them everywhere and you can't go anywhere without them, and then your other friends don't really like them, and then suddenly you find that you're only spending time with them, or you're alone, or else they get angry with you, that is definitely a fertile ground for abuse. And this happens in romantic relationships, it happens in friendships, and I have also seen it happen amongst family members at times. So you need to be careful of this and wary of these signs. The number one reason that abuses occur is due to low self-esteem and self-doubt. Believe it or not, the low self-esteem and the self-doubt is both the victim and the perpetrator. Someone who has high self-esteem and who knows who they are and stands in their integrity and has good self-awareness does not have the compulsion or the need to feed off of others' energy. They have their own. They're very centered. They're grounded. I mean, everybody gets out of whack every once in a while, but for the most part, these people are very solid. When someone is not, and they have to rely on others, they can do that through these codependent relationships. So it's something to watch out for. A question to ask yourself is, are you a perpetual victim? Or do you know someone, are you friends with somebody who's a perpetual victim? They're always complaining. They're very possessive. They get rather jealous of your other friends or other people that you're around, or they get jealous of your job or your success or whatever the case may be. Do they isolate you, or are you isolating someone else? Controlling. Do they try and control everything you do? Or are you controlling them? And by controlling, I'm not talking about necessarily someone who might have OCD, who tells you have to take your shoes off before you walk on my rug, and, you know, I'll get your coffee because it's got to be done this way, like that kind of controlling. I'm talking about the kind of controlling that inhibits you from having outside relationships or inhibits you from exploring other interests. They control what you watch on television all the time. They never allow you to watch what you want to watch. It's always about what they want. That kind of thing. Do you do that to someone else? Are you master of the remote control? Be careful of that. Belittling. Do you find yourself belittling other people? Or do you find them belittling you? Now, some of this is tricky also because there are times when we perceive things as being negative or belittling when they may not be. So a good thing to try is, when you're feeling this way, is to see if your close friends and the people who know you, if they're seeing the same thing. That's difficult when it only happens when you and this person is alone. So if it only happens like backhanded compliments and just feeling kind of strange when you're alone with this one friend or you're significant other, that's probably not a good sign. But if they're saying things in front of other people, you can ask and say, hey, that kind of struck me funny when Susie said that to me. Did you get anything else out of that, or was that just me? Because it could be just you. You could be having a sensitive day, or it could be a trigger for you. It's not necessarily that they're projecting something. You might be taking something in that's not even there. That's what to look out for. And that sense of tracking that and looking for those kind of things is what gaslighting is about. So when someone is gaslighting you, they are basically having you question yourself, and they are dishonest. And then they will try to convince you that you're the one who's dishonest. They throw things back on you. These are the people who will do things to you and then somehow make it your fault. It's the abuser who hits the victim and then tells the victim, see what you made me do? You made me do this. When that's not really the case. They will become progressively more insistent that you're crazy, it's you overreact, you do this, you do that. It usually is projecting what they're actually doing onto you, but you begin to question your own logic, you begin to question your own integrity. They question your memory, your logic, your integrity, your intelligence. Sometimes they will come right out and say it. Oh, you're so stupid. I can't believe you did that. And things like that. And other times it will be more subtle. Are you sure that you took your medicine? And keep questioning things like that. They often appear helpful or concerned. Well, I just wanted to make sure that you got this done because you forgot about it last week. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but they're going to keep reinforcing that sense of needing them and reinforcing that sense of self-doubt in you. And that's what gaslighting is. And it can be very, very subtle, and eventually it becomes a little more pronounced, especially if you try to pull away from them. But gaslighting can be very dangerous. It can be deadly at times because it creates very poor self-esteem. It makes the person really question their sanity, and it creates depression and can create suicidal thoughts because the person gets to the point where they're really not sure of their reality. So when you're with someone and you have an interaction, and every time you have an interaction with them, when you walk away, you feel a little less. You feel less strong. You feel less certain. You feel less confident. You are probably in an abusive relationship. How do we deal with this? Especially if it's someone that maybe, for whatever reason, for money, for proximity, for whatever, we have to deal with these people every day. How do we deal with them once we realize that they really are not treating us well? And if we are hypersensitive to maintaining harmony and to being accepted, it's very difficult to stand up and say, hey, this is not right. I'm not going to put up with this. This is unacceptable. It's very difficult for us to do these things. So where do we find the strength? How do we do this? Well, number one, if you have a support system. Even if during the course of time that you've been friends with this person or they've been your significant other, they have created a space where you're not comfortable with your support system anymore, go back to it and tap it, because your real friends will be there no matter what. If they see that you're being abused or that you're confused, they will want to help you. So look to your support system. Your support system, if you don't have one already built in, if you're not good at friendships, it could be your church, it could be a meetup group, it could be people that you hang out with at the library. You may have to go out and create a support system. Maybe you need to do something like go to CODA, Codependence Anonymous. Maybe you need to find a therapist and talk these things through. There are different ways to empower yourself and to really build up your self-esteem and get to know who you are. One of the ways that I teach my clients to do this is through a course that I have called Completing the Circle, Path to Self-Empowerment. And it's a 6-week or 6-month course. You go through it at your own pace. We do it over the internet. And we start off with knowing yourself, really getting to know the voices in your own head, really getting to know your own integrity, your wants, your desires. Who are you? And then you learn how to be who you are without judgment and without having to get approval from everyone else around you. So if you're interested in any of these services, coaching one-on-one or group coaching, let me know. This is Geralyn St Joseph, and you can find me at gabrielstrumpet.net. Have a blessed day.